Hi, English 111. Welcome to the cause and effect essay. If I had to only teach one style of essay or one way of writing, I'm pretty sure I would teach this one, the cause and effect, because not only is it a good way to write, and it's a useful tool for writing in pretty much any class that you will ever write in, but it is also a key way of thinking about the world, and thinking that is often flawed. And so being a good cause and effect thinker, I think, is one of the more important things that we can do just as humans and citizens of the world. So I really like the cause and effect essay. That's also the reason why I use the cause and effect essay as the first essay where you will be using academic research. Because again, in thinking as just a human and a citizen of the world, if I want to make sure that my thinking is logical and it's not faulty, and I'm not thinking that things are causes or effects that aren't really, I want to make sure that I'm getting my information from good sources. So part of the joining together of the cause and effect way of thinking and academic research is to bring those two ideas together, that your cause and effect way of thinking about the world or whatever should always be founded upon good information. So let's talk about the cause and effect essay. The key way to start thinking about cause and effect, and this is going to be important for the outline that you do when you start kind of organizing your thoughts, is you want to think of the cause and the effects of something like a timeline. So if I create a timeline like this, and I put whatever it is that I'm analyzing here in the middle, whatever comes before it could be a cause. Causes always come before, right? And then the effects of this thing, whatever it is that I'm analyzing, the effects always come after. So that seems really logical when you start thinking about it, but causes and effects can actually be pretty murky and muddy, and we can end up sort of thinking in a loop if we're not careful. So in the topic choice, thinking about putting your topic here in the middle, and then considering the idea of time for causes and then for effects. So a couple of things to keep in mind. There are passages in your textbook. The reading in Subject and Strategy is going to go through some of these ideas. Please do the reading. It's really good background information for what you're going to be doing. So there are possible causes and effects, and then there are actual causes and effects. Both are valid. So the example given in the textbook is a flood that is caused by a dam that breaks. So the actual causes of this flood are the dam breaking, using bad materials for the dam, not using correct geological surveys, whatever. So those were the actual causes of the flood. But as a critical thinker, it makes sense to start considering, well, what are some possible causes? What could we go back and really start thinking about in terms of, well, maybe this did contribute, even if just a little bit. And then when we think about effects, we can think about the topic and think in terms of, well, what might it cause? What might be some effects of this thing? There might be some actual effects that we know, but we might also just be working on a hunch and working on, well, in the future, the possible effects of this thing might be X, Y, and Z. That is all still perfectly good thinking as long as it can be supported logically. So you can't go off the rails here. You can't be like, an effect of this wildfire is that we all get rich. Well, maybe, maybe not. Can you logically prove that? So actual and possible, both are worth thinking about, and both are worth writing about as long as you can connect them logically. The other category to think about here is immediate and remote. So let me show you an example. So the example I'm going to use is actually from my life. Back in 2003, I was living in Montana, and as a Western state, it has to deal with wildfire. That's just common in the West. It's actually a good thing in small doses because it can actually, it can cause the forest and the wildlands themselves to regenerate and purify themselves. In fact, there are some trees that need extreme heat for their seeds to actually open up. So for those trees to propagate, they need fire. So fire can be a good thing. So it happens out west all the time. Happens here in the east too. We know that after the fires down in the Smokies and Gatlinburg and that sort of thing. So let me put that here as my topic. So 2003 fire. So I'm going to talk about this specific fire that happened where I lived in Montana. So I don't know if you can hear the thunder, but it's thundering now. The immediate cause of that fire was lightning. So there were storms rolling through, and a lightning strike on the mountains near where I lived caused the fire to start. So that's the immediate cause because it's closest in time. However, it makes more sense now for me to think, well, let me go further back in time and think about what else may have contributed to that fire. So I could go all the way back to in the 1980s, the National Forest Service had the policy that anytime a fire started, put it out. Well, I just said that fire is good for a lot of the ecology out west. So this policy of just putting everything out was actually quite dangerous because over the decades, all of this brush and all of this fuel built up. So that now in the 90s and in the 2000s, wildfires are bigger and hotter and faster because of this policy from the 80s, which has since been changed. And so now there are more policies in place that are more like just let it burn as long as it's not near civilization or human structures. And even then, they'll protect to a certain degree. But then once the fire gets to a certain point, they will evacuate because it can't be stopped. And the people can't be, their homes cannot be protected. So the 2003 fire was that way. It was mostly within the wilderness. I lived in a wilderness area. I lived on the western side of the Bob Marshall Wilderness, which is an enormous wilderness area in Montana. And so as the fire burned, for the most part, they could just let it burn. But because it was so close to the town where I lived and worked, we were put on alert. And I did have to evacuate my home and kind of think about, you know, what can I fit in my car to try to save. And I worked at a boarding school, so we had to evacuate the school and a herd of about 25 horses, which, you know, was scary. The fire ended up just getting within about a mile of my house and of the school, so we were lucky. But anyway, if I'm thinking about causes of this fire, I could go back to these 1980s policies. Those are remote causes, but they're still causes because I can draw a logical line from those policies in the 80s to 2003. So then if we think about effects of the fire, so what happens after the fire? Well, an immediate effect is things are destroyed. So you have to do a lot of restoration, especially if there are human structures that have been burned. So that costs a lot of money. Insurance companies have to dole out a lot of insurance for these homes that have been destructed. Builders and contractors have to be brought in, sometimes from other places, just to be able to supply for the demand of rebuilding. There are all kinds of other questions too then about some effects of the fire. Fires are incredibly expensive, especially the big ones, whenever they are being fought by wildfire crews from all across the country. So we might have crews here in North Carolina that typically deal with fires here in the Smokies. And if there's an enormous fire in California or in Montana or Idaho, they'll fly out to help. Well, who pays for all of that? Who pays to feed and to house and to protect these firefighters? Well, if they're national forest fighters, our tax dollars pay for that. So there are possible effects on taxes. There are possible effects on the cost of living in a particular area. I know that with flooding, for example, it changes your insurance radically if your house is in a flood zone. So there are all kinds of possible effects that could come from this fire as well. So when you're thinking cause and effect, remember to keep it kind of in terms of a timeline to help you with your brainstorming. And then remember too, you're not just looking at only, actual causes. You might be looking at possible causes or very remote kind of causes. Those are absolutely fine to write about as long as you can make the logical connection. So, keeping that point in mind, let's talk really quickly about a faulty way of using cause and effect. Your textbook goes over this. Actually, I'll write this down because it's a fun Latin phrase. The Latin term for this fallacy, which just basically means a false way of thinking, is I know I'm taking time, and it's weird just sitting there watching me write. Okay. Post hoc, ergo propter hoc. Literally, this is Latin for after this, therefore because of this. So this is a fallacy. It's typically shortened to the post hoc fallacy. Here's what the post hoc fallacy is. Just because event A happens first and event B happens second does not mean that A caused B. It might just be that A happened first. So this is in terms of statistics and qualitative literacy, the difference between correlation and causation. So correlation is, A happened first, B happened second. That's correlation. It does not mean that A caused B. This is where superstitions come from. So if you think, for example, this morning I walked under a ladder and then later in the afternoon I got hit by a car. Therefore, walking under a ladder is bad luck. That's the post hoc fallacy because walking under the ladder this morning did not cause you to get hit by the car this afternoon. There were probably a lot of things that caused you to get hit by the car. You weren't paying attention, the driver wasn't paying attention, the driver was speeding, there weren't stoplights, whatever. But it wasn't the ladder that you walked under this morning. That had nothing to do with you getting hit by the car. So missing the logical connection that shows causation is the post hoc fallacy. So we see this at work a lot in our world. So for example, we hear a lot, I got the flu vaccine, then I got the flu, therefore the flu vaccine caused the flu. Nope, it didn't. That's not how the vaccine works. The vaccine cannot possibly cause the flu. It can cause your body to have a reaction as though you have the flu, but it cannot cause the flu. So that's a post hoc fallacy because that's thinking correlation. A happened first, then B, but there really is no causation. So in your thinking for your cause and effect essay, I want to encourage you to avoid the post hoc fallacy and just make sure that any causes or effects that you're writing about actually logically connect. The last thing I want to say is this is the first essay where you're using academic research. So we just spent an entire module talking about where to find academic sources, what they are, and then how to use MLA format. So in-text citation, so in the text of your essay, those parentheses that says where this information came from. And then at the end of the essay, the works cited page. I want to see all of that done and done well. You know, we just spent 2 weeks talking about it. So I want to see you using it and really trying to make it as correct as possible. There is a topic list that you are to choose from for this essay. So when you read the assignment sheet, be sure to read the topic list and choose your topic from that list. All right, I look forward to seeing what you write about for your cause and effect essay.